Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Everything Technology Podcast. I'm Bob O'Donnell, the host of the podcast, as well as the president, founder, and chief analyst at Technologis Research. And if you're new to the Everything Technology Podcast, we are all about tech news, industry, analysis, and conversation. So what we do is talk about news of the week from the tech business, provide some context around what it means, and then in the second half of the program, we've got an interview with a tech luminary. This week, I'm super pleased to be interviewing Sam Burd, who runs the entire PC division for Dell Technologies. So stick around for that. But first, let's get into the news. A ton of stuff going on this week, even though we're late into the summer. Kind of surprising, but there was a lot of things going on. Things kicked off with HPE's Discover. HPE is the server division of HP. If you remember, several years back, HP was split into a PC and printer division. That was HP Inc. And then HPE is the server division. So Discover is their big annual event. And at this year's event, they made several announcements around their GreenLake initiatives. Now, to HPE's credit, GreenLake was this idea of delivering all of their products, which is, you think of their traditional hardware storage products, as a service. Now, they don't sell everything that way, but they want to offer everything that way, and they're expanding that range of products and services. And GreenLake Central is the software that allows you to do this and configure it. Sometimes it means ordering stuff that they send to your location, but they still manage it and own it, and you pay for it as you use it in a cloud-like model. So anyway, what they chose to introduce this year was something called GreenLake Lighthouse. Now, Lighthouse is essentially a platform that allows you to run cloud-based workloads. Now, you can run them in a hybrid environment, meaning you can put some in the public cloud or put them remotely. What's interesting about Lighthouse is, as far as I can tell, it seems to be essentially an entire platform, almost an OS-like platform, in the same way that we see from your Amazon AWS, Google Cloud, Microsoft Azure. So kind of an interesting development. I'll be curious to see how HPE extends Lighthouse, but that's basically Lighthouse. On top of that, they had two other items. Number one, Project Aurora, that works in conjunction with Lighthouse, or is going to. It's basically their security protocol framework, whatever we want to call it. Starts with hardware root of trust, which, oh, by the way, is an interesting topic we'll get into a little bit later for Windows 11. But hardware root of trust up through the software. And so Project Aurora is going to be this zero trust framework that allows companies to run these workloads in a trusted way. So that's Project Aurora. The last piece was kind of an interesting way to start thinking about this. It's silicon on demand. And so when you realize that a lot of enterprise software and a lot of cloud-based services, you get charged per core. And what HPE is doing in conjunction with Intel, they figured out a way to allow you to turn on and off different cores so that you can be charged accordingly. Instead of them always being on, you can actually say, hey, I want 16 cores allocated to this particular service and I'm charged for the 16 cores and what have you. Kind of an interesting concept, actually. Shows you the flexibility that you can get to. HPE is going to have this first. Apparently, it'll be exclusive to them for 6 months, and then I expect to see other vendors offer something similar. Another big bit of news, Global Foundries, a U.S.-based chip-making company. They have chip-making facilities here, manufacturing facilities, or fabs, as they call them, here in the U.S., in Dresden, Germany, also over in Singapore. And this week, they announced additions to their Singapore facilities, to the Singapore fabs, $4 billion investment. Now, the reason this is interesting, of course, there's the silicon shortage that we've all been hearing about. But Global Foundries chose to take a different path as well, because there's so much interest now in increasing manufacturing capacity for chips. A lot of governments around the world are eager to get involved, as well as a lot of customers. So what's unique about this announcement from Global Foundries is they got both the Singapore Economic Development Board, as well as what they called committed customers, who they didn't publicly disclose, to provide money to help support this. Because $4 billion is kind of a lot of money. And so I think it's interesting, because I think we're going to start to see other fabs and other silicon makers look to both government as well as private company investments. Here in the U.S., there's a number of bills in Congress right now designed to support manufacturing with either R&D support or straight out monies. Up to $52 billion, in fact, is being allocated from what's called the CHIPS Act. And there's another thing called the FABS Act that's in process. Bottom line is all of this should lead to more manufacturing here in the U.S., and you're going to see other countries around the world want to do that as well. So I think it's an interesting twist in how we think about the chip manufacturing world, and with Global Foundries leading the way on that front. Other interesting news this week, we are the week before officially the Mobile World Congress trade show, which frankly is probably not going to be much of anything this year. There have been a number of companies kind of taking advantage of the fact that MWC is going to be happening and they're making announcements. This past week, what we saw were a number of companies who do 5G network infrastructure. Right, I know you're thinking, wow, seriously, how much more boring can you get? But look, if you don't have the infrastructure, you can't have the phones, you can't have the services. And what we saw was Samsung Networks introduced a couple of things. They actually had it was quite a slick presentation. I got to give them credit. They turned what could be a very boring topic into something interesting. And they talked about all the work that Samsung does, everything from building the modem chips in their equipment to the software they're doing for the Open RAN developments and a whole bunch of areas. They specifically also introduced a couple of things. One is what they call one radio antenna that basically combines the capabilities of several different antennas and pieces of equipment into one, thereby allowing you to fit more of them in more places. And that's important for practical reasons and for obvious reasons. And they also unveiled some new chips that are going to be powering next generation small cells and other equipment coming in 2022. These chips are all comply with what's called the Release 16 document, 3GPP. I know, lots of acronyms. Bottom line is that's essentially sort of second generation 5G. And so they're building the chips and releasing the chips that you're going to see in their own branded equipment and potentially, of course, in others as well. But Samsung is kind of unique in that they're doing the chips and the hardware and the software. We haven't seen a whole lot of other folks do that. Other than somebody like an Ericsson, who also had news this week in conjunction with Intel. Intel and Ericsson talked about some new capabilities they're bringing, in particular around enabling mid-band services. And with mid-band, which is critically important for what's called C-band here in the US or CBRS, that's the sweet spot for 5G. And so now with Ericsson having more equipment that supports mid-band that allows the telco providers, your AT&Ts, your Verizons, your T-Mos, to more widely support that. So that's going to be important. The other interesting thing from Ericsson was the fact that they offered this, they've got a software-only solution. The whole world of network infrastructure is changing because it used to be hardware-only from proprietary companies like Ericsson, like Nokia, like Huawei. That's why that was so controversial. And of course, more recently, like Samsung. Samsung and others, however, have also started to do software, as has Ericsson. So what was interesting was that Ericsson announced a software package that would run on standard Intel hardware servers from Intel powered, but they also provided a link to existing hardware-only solutions that are proprietary Ericsson. And so what that means is as companies start to do virtualized RAN and more software-based network infrastructure, they can tie it back to their existing traditional hardware infrastructure. And because it takes forever to deploy lots of new sites, that's really important, and that's going to be practical. Speaking of deploying lots of new sites, T-Mobile pulled off a classic T-Mobile and celebrated the fact that they had reached their goal of 300 million points of presence, POPs, here in the US, to serve nationwide 5G. Now, that's the low-band 5G, which is, frankly, not a lot faster than 4G right now, but eventually you're going to see additional services on top of that. And to celebrate, what did they do? Boom, gin, 5G gin. They're singing my song, speaking my tune. Martinis afterwards. Anyway, 5G gin and ginger beer from T-Mobile. And believe it or not, they're actually selling this stuff. Like you can go to their website and actually purchase the 5G gin, which is pretty good, actually. The download speeds are very good. Yeah. Anyway, so that was kind of funny and just a classic promo from T-Mobile. Lattice, a small company that makes semiconductors, introduced a new FPGA this week called the Certus NX. Now, again, a lot of people are thinking, why are we talking about this? But what we're seeing a lot in the tech world these days is new technologies that are making other types of devices smarter. So what's interesting about the Lattice products, it goes into, oh, by the way, network equipment and network infrastructure. It goes into automotive. It goes into industrial applications. It goes into a lot of places where we're seeing connectivity and more intelligence being put in. And so, in the big picture of things, not everybody's going to be using this kind of stuff, but it's interesting to see companies like Lattice make these additions to their range of chips, which in turn power new, smarter devices, which in turn can be connected, et cetera, et cetera. You get it. It's a virtuous circle of technological advancement. Citrix this week also had an event. Like I told you, it was a busy week. They had a big event where it was their industry analyst event, and they had a number of different capabilities they talked about, particularly around their workspace. And I'm not going to go into all the details, but one of the last things they talked about was a really interesting concept. And think about it this way. We're using AI in our consumer applications. And like if you wanted to, they use the example of buying a TV. When you want to buy a TV, you do a search on the web, and there's some intelligence in the search. And based on that search, you can do more research, and that'll lead you to another application, which will lead you to another application. And there's AI involved in all the various steps of how people work with their consumer applications. We're not really seeing that yet on the enterprise side. So what Citrix talked about with their Citrix Workspace product, which is a tool they have that lets you combine all of your various workplace tools, whether you're running Microsoft M365 or Google Workspace or other things, as well as things like chat tools and Zoom and all these other kinds of things. You can organize that together. And what Citrix was talking about was saying, hey, why don't we have the ability, and this is what they're building, to integrate AI across multiple enterprise applications so that you kind of get that same smart experience while leveraging all your enterprise tools. And they also had things that allow you to, things like automate, look at your schedule, determine the best time to do certain things, and provide some smarts to the way you work. It's kind of a fascinating topic, and I'll be curious to see how Citrix continues to develop that in their workspace. And then finally, of course, last bit of news is probably the most interesting to most of you, and that's the launch of Windows 11. Yes, it had been rumored widely and, of course, leaked the week before, but look, this is big news, and it's really interesting on multiple different levels. Number one, just kind of psychologically, what this does is it continues to provide excitement and freshness to the PC market. Luckily, the PC market has had an incredible year. And in fact, and I wrote about this in a column for USA Today that should be out shortly on the impact of Windows 11. If it weren't for the chip shortages we've had, a lot of people think this year, 2021, could be the biggest year in the history of nearly 40 years of PCs. It may not get there because of those shortages. It might fall less and be number 2, but still, it's incredible how much has happened. Now you add a new operating system on top of it. Remember that new operating systems have traditionally been a factor in driving and renewing PC sales. Wow, all of a sudden, that's pretty exciting. But above and beyond that sort of big picture issue, let's look at the actual details. Windows 11 looks really slick, looks really nice. Some people say it looks kind of like Mac OS, whatever, but they've done a number of things to make usability better. They put the start bar in the center. And if you're using a big monitor, as small a deal as that seems, it's tremendous. That combined with this, what they call snap technology that will rearrange windows, is fantastic. Those things by themselves are going to make a lot of people go, wow, that and the slick new interface, of course. Wow, this is really cool. There's a lot of work they're also doing under the hood. They also had a new news gathering service that looks with widgets that looks pretty slick. They're integrating Teams. It's Teams chat, to be clear, but they're integrating Teams into the UI and into the start bar because, look, we're all using these things. Now, will that cause a problem for, Zoom and other companies? We'll see. And with all the antitrust going on, it's kind of interesting Microsoft chose to do that because if they don't open it up to other platforms to potentially plug into that, that could be seen as potentially anti-competitive, I think. So be interesting to watch. But the point is they're integrating communications into the standard PC experience. They're accommodating different ways that people are working. And best of all, they're going to do it for free. Now, there was some interesting controversy this week because one of the things that Microsoft is doing is requiring a TPM or Trusted Platform Module, and specifically TPM 2.0. Now, that technology has been out for a while, and it's been fairly standard in enterprise systems, hasn't always been there in consumer systems. In most of them, it's there. Some desktops don't have it turned on, and so there's been a lot of back and forth this week. I discovered myself, I'm using it's essentially a gaming system. It's a high-end creator system, a desktop system, AMD-powered Threadripper, super fast, credible system. But when I tried the Windows 11 compatibility tool, it said, it's not going to work. I'm like, how is that possible? Well, it turned out the TPM capabilities were not turned on in the BIOS, and I had to find it. It wasn't super easy, and had some scary warning messages about how all this stuff is not going to be encrypted or is going to be encrypted, blah, blah, blah. Bottom line is, turned it on, restarted the machine, everything worked. I ran the compatibility tool, boom, it all worked. So something to be aware of, but it's going to be interesting to see as Windows 11 rolls out. First, Windows 11 based PCs, believe it or not, will be out this fall, and you'll be able to upgrade starting at the end of the year as well. So bottom line is a lot of excitement around the PC industry now with Windows 11 coming out. Clearly, obviously, it's a bit of an answer as well to what Apple's been doing and the success they're seeing with their M1 based Macs. But, things are picking it up. Nothing like competition to make everybody better. And I think we're going to see even more advancements than we've already seen in PCs over the next year. Speaking of PCs, we're going to be talking with Sam Burd, who runs the client division at Dell Technologies, right after this. Hello, everybody. I'm Bob O'Donnell, and welcome back to the interview portion of the Everything Technology podcast. I am super excited today to be joined by Sam Burd. I've known Sam for a very long time. He is the president of the Client Solutions Group for Dell Technologies. In other words, he's a bigwig. He's an important dude. So I'm super happy to have him here. And again, I've known Sam a long time, and we always get to talk about the PC business, but just kind of, in these one-on-one meetings or small group meetings. So I thought it would be great to be able to talk about the state of the PC business with Sam and kind of share that with the world. So Sam, first of all, welcome to the podcast. Thanks again for joining. So the PC business, wow. I mean, I've been seeing people talk about the fact that if it weren't for chip shortages, and we can talk about that in a second, this 2021 could be the largest year for PC shipments in the history of PCs. It's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, Bob, you're totally right. Hey, thank you for having me here. It's great to get a chance to talk to you. As always, I love our discussions and conversations. But you're exactly right. I mean, it's been an incredible year for the PC when you think about the work it did in keeping people connected during the pandemic and the times that we've gone through. Seeing the demand in this industry, it is people have realized the important role the PC plays. They want to have a great PC because that equals a wonderful experience. It's especially important when the PC's bringing your world into your home. But I also look at into the future and see it's really important in the way people are going to operate. And like you said, demand this year, if you look at IDC's forecast, 18% growth, it would be over 350 million units. That would be the second best year ever for the PC. I think back to 10 years ago, you and I have talked about this. People were saying like
Yeah.
the PC was going to be dead 10 years ago, and
Yeah.
it's one of the best years in the history of the PC this past year, and it helped the world be successful and really stick together.
Well, exactly. I mean, that's, people have finally kind of come to recognize the incredible value that a PC can have. And I don't think that's going to go away for quite some time. I mean, yes, are we still going to be use our smartphones and other devices as the world starts to open up? Of course we are. But I think the PC has solidified its place in the minds and hearts and frankly the day-to-day experiences of people's lives. And so I think that's what's so important about it. But what's fascinating is a lot of people thought with the pandemic, of course, that the pandemic is what inspired this, but it got people thinking differently. But of course, then the next discussion is, oh well, now especially here in the U.S., that thankfully the pandemic does seem to be getting under control. Oh well, then what happens? Is the PC market just going to fall off the cliff? I mean, I certainly don't think so, but I'm curious for your take on that as well.
Yeah, well, I am really optimistic around what the future holds for the PC because it's for all the reasons you described, Bob. Like people have figured out different ways of working, and you look at how we're going to operate in the world going forward, and it's not going to be just like it's never kind of just like before. It won't be just like before the pandemic. We had lots of PCs around before the pandemic. We saw how good the experience is around a larger screen device that you can go connect with people on. We've done, we'd go do surveys of how people are going to operate in the world in the future. We see people want to operate in a hybrid kind of model. Take the things that they learned that worked well in the past year around how I could, think about connecting with the team around the world without having to get on a plane, be jet lagged, spend a day to go do that, have to be somewhere else in the world. It's like you could go do that. You could go do that with your family. See people that you had, reconnecting with friends from school. It's a great device and way to go and do that. Productivity in businesses changed because of the PC. There are other places and times when you want to be in person and have that engagement. So we see the world operating in that kind of hybrid model. We see technology being really important when you think about productivity, getting things done, way people do entertainment, the way people learn. Like all of those are forever changed. Technology, as you look over time, has been increasingly important in the way people work and do those activities. I think the past year accelerated how technology was infused into those activities and how important it was. And I see that continuing in the future. It's not like that, the old friend that we realized is pretty valuable will continue to be a valuable friend in the future.
Yeah, well, exactly. So, and and what's fascinating, of course, is, and again, you and I have had these conversations for years. It was the notion of a PC per household, and or in a couple per classroom. I mean, we've clearly moved to a world where it's a PC per person, not per household.
Yep.
Not per classroom. It's every child having some kind of computing device. Every person at home of above a certain age having a computing device. Obviously, every worker having a computing device for the most part. Um, and so that's dramatically, I think, had an impact as well. What, but obviously that puts a lot of strain and stress on companies like Dell trying to figure out how to provide these, different solutions. So I guess my next question would be, what was the thing that caught you guys most off guard during the pandemic, and how have you reacted to that?
Yeah, well, we've certainly seen the trend that you have of this PC to person kind of how you get stuff done because it wasn't good enough to have a shared device. I also look at same thing, and you describe schools well, and PCs being infused into the learning environment and starting to go. I think it's a really good thing. Technology is important in the world. It's great that our kids are learning with a PC from the moment they start in school. I look back and go 18 months ago, we could not have ever anticipated the demand that we saw for PCs. We have certainly have a world-class supply chain team and a history of doing that really well at Dell. So the work that we did to get the right products together for customers has been really important in the past 18 months. And we're really proud of our ability to deliver to people and businesses that really needed it, whether it was, healthcare related spaces that were doing research, helping keep people healthy, getting students equipped with devices, all that was a big challenge that gets thrown your way with really short lead times. It was frankly fun and a great challenge for us to go and react in a really challenging situation, but to be able to do things that helped get the world to a better place was really great. And now I look at the work we're doing on the team. We're figuring out how people are using technology and the ways that links together, and then how do we take the products that we're designing and fit that into the way the world's going to operate going forward. 2 years ago, we had people covering over cameras, with stickies on their systems. And then suddenly it became, oh my gosh, I got to get that thing off my system. And then, hey, I want a great camera. I need a great audio experience. I'm going to use this to, connect like we are today. I'm going to connect with people around the world. And what size screen device do I want? How do I make these things work around another set of peripherals that keeps me productive at home, will keep me productive and be something I want when I'm back in the office several days a week. So we've been thinking about that next phase now of, okay, how do we go design this technology to work great in the new ways that people are going to go operate?
Well, and I want to follow up on that point about how we see PCs evolving because of these new requirements. But I want to go back first, touch a little bit on something you mentioned, which we all know is there's, for a long time we've been hearing about chip shortages and other challenges, in the supply chain, not just for Dell, but for the entire, tech business. How big of an impact, first of all, did that prove to be, and is it currently, and what are you expecting, say, over the next 6 months? Admittedly, I know it's a tough thing to call, but from your vantage point, you've got a pretty good perspective. How do you see that evolving?
Yeah, well, Bob, we've gone through several years of shortages. If you look at the PC industry, from CPU shortages to display shortages to now, you can look at anything in the world, and whether it's PCs or other technology, shortage of fab capacity and ICs. So you talked about having a record year. If you look at the projections that IDC has for the industry, there's demand for cars with more technology built into them. You look at 5G phones. um, every device around the house or in businesses is smart. So we're seeing those constraints in chip capacity that hit many different industries. And the work that we have done is, one, have really good relationships with the companies in the supply chain that need to get that work done. I think as a world, we figured out, hey, though, people were, at one point it was like people are never going to buy another car again, and we're all going to be in one place. So we've started to figure out that's not the case. People can make the kind of capital investments that need to be made. We can work with the companies that we work with and go and get those parts into our systems. I think we do a good job of understanding how quickly that can happen with the demand that we've seen. There are lead times on systems. We communicate that to customers. They can order with the confidence that when we commit those lead times, we're about getting those parts and then delivering to them in those kind of windows. But we've seen a great demand across the world for things that are smarter, and PCs are a big piece of that. It takes a little bit of time for that capital investment then to catch up to the way that the world has shifted.
Is there any particular sub-segment that's been hit, like, commercial desktops or commercial notebooks or consumer notebooks or gaming? Is there one category in particular of the PC market that's been, a little bit harder to get access to the parts you need than others?
I think it's varied at different times. I mean, what we have seen some phases of where demand came, and we've talked about education was a huge space, especially 12 to 18 months ago, as we were going, how do we get students to work from home? How do teachers take in? We accelerated the process of getting learning plans to be digital friendly because we just had to go do that. So you saw a really big surge in people looking for systems to use for education for students. I looked today and we saw the same thing in the consumer space of, how do I take this PC that I had, maybe get it up to date, or make sure everyone in my family or my kids, I want a separate PC for my kids. I don't want them, they had to go use that. They're playing games. I need to have a PC for each of the people in the household. As I look at the U.S. space now, as we see companies going back to work, it's gotten easier to go and update employee systems. So when we sent people home with a system to go get the job done, it's a little harder to go do the refreshes and everything that are really important to the experience they have. Now that people can be back in the office, it's around the IT team. The companies are starting to think about, how do I modernize that process so it's less physical touch more software. And geez, I can get Sam or Bob now an updated system because it's just easier to go and do. So we've seen the demand shift to different places in the industry. A lot of the components that ICs and go in systems across the board. So it's not like there's a category that I would call out specifically. We've just seen some of these different waves of where demand falls based on where we are in the cycle of getting things done quickly. Now in some parts around the world, things returning to more people being back in offices, more back into this kind of future model we think of, this hybrid way of working.
Right. So I want to go back now to the comment you mentioned earlier about PCs evolving and the technologies there. I mean, briefly mentioned 5G. I personally think 5G equipped PCs is going to be a really big movement. We're starting to hear talk about AI accelerators. What other kind of key technology advances are you expecting to really impact the PC market over the next, say, 12 to 18 months, or even 2 years out?
Yeah, we overall, Bob, we've looked at how we start to make the PC. We talked about this kind of companion and friend view, and we look at how we start building intelligence into the PC so that it becomes away from the tool, but a really smart friend who it's like someone who knows what you're going to say next and can anticipate what you're
Right.
thinking, how you're doing things, how you're feeling. And I think that's a great place for us to go with technology and get out of the old world of how am I changing my settings? How am I optimizing this? And it felt like this kind of tool and the kind of relationship that you had that was like, I had to figure out stuff and make it fit me versus how do I create a system that knows how I'm using it and how do I set up battery life? How do I set up power? How do I use the screen? How does that work in different lighting conditions? How is audio smart and figures out what stuff I want to hear, what stuff I don't want to hear? How do I have a great, a camera that I can see when it's on, when it's off, and it's like deliver that experience to me in a really smart way. And then it start to put the components around it, and it's like that's a really big difference. It's one that you want it to be invisible. Like the more seamless it is and it just happens, the better, because I want this thing to be ready for me and to be something that I can go and use without a whole lot of fuss. I want it to just work. I want it to work in a great way. Other than that,
Uh,
yeah, I know that personally, I'm like, hey, I love that. Our team is doing a lot of work when I think about the intelligence and capability we have to build on the PC. We're looking at how we start building those data models and be smart around how people are using systems and go optimize. And then there's a lot of
got
hardware things you can go and do that you touched on of whether it's communications and always on connectivity is great. Whether it's Wi-Fi, how many times has that gone down with people in houses and they've realized it's really good to have another backup communication. So I think 5G has great potential inside PCs. We've looked at just even screen size evolution. Pre-pandemic, it was like, how do I get the smallest screen size ever? I'm traveling a lot, and I want it to really fit inside the smallest carrying case I can. And then it becomes, well, geez, if I'm at home, I'd like a bigger screen. I want maybe a little space to have a really good camera, a high resolution camera that will be effective when I'm on the go. How do I get a little more power in the system so when I'm running all these apps at the same time, it works great? How do I build this so it connects into my environment really seamlessly? So it's good technology like that I see coming as we look at 6 months, 12 months, 18, 24 months out, and really taking this big screen form factor, easy way of inputting data, interacting with your device, and how we continue to take this to the next level for people.
Sounds good. One last question I would hit you. Of course, we had big news that was just announced by Microsoft this past week, Windows 11. So
So
curious for your take on what you think Windows 11 can do for the PC market.
I was extremely excited to see Windows 11. So I think it's a great step forward in seeing opportunity we have in this space of having Microsoft out there talking about investing in the operating system and really delivering a great experience for for people using Windows, building that as an open platform so companies can innovate. You can control how you're using your system and bringing that excitement to the PC. I you probably remember when I remember the discussion of Windows 10 was going to be the last operating system, and it's like it's that it's like technology and everything moves forward, and seeing the leadership of Microsoft and Panos and putting what to me is a really exciting product and an exciting step forward in Windows 11 is great. I love to see that investment in this space because I see a lot of opportunity in how people are using systems and continue to push the envelope, and to see Microsoft doing that on the operating system. We're doing that with our products and our systems and the designs we're putting together. I just think it means more excitement for people, and more innovation in this space going forward, which is really really important. And it keeps the space vibrant. It keeps it great for people who are using technology. When you think about that tool, whether it's my son in the next room playing games before he gets ready to head off to work, or someone running their business, like having companies innovating around technology and how it's going to help their productivity, it's a great thing to have happening in the world.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we always, and again, from watching the PC industry for many decades, as we both have, Windows OS upgrades are really important for the ongoing health of the PC market. And, at the end of that Windows 11 presentation, Satya Nadella, Microsoft CEO, said, "Hey,
Yeah.
this is the beginning of a new era of Windows." So clearly, Windows 11 is not going to be the last version of Windows.
That sounds good. I hope that's true, Bob. That sounds great.
Thank you so much for taking the time. Sam Burd, again, he's the president of the Client Solutions Group for Dell Technologies. And I really appreciate the time and the conversation. Hello again, everybody. And thanks again for tuning in to the Everything Technology podcast. Once again, I'm Bob O'Donnell. I really appreciate it. If you like the program, please let me know. Like it, subscribe. Tell me what you think in those comments. I'm really looking forward to any kind of feedback you can provide. And I'm going to look forward to speaking with you again sometime soon. Thanks. Take care. Bye-bye.